I'm Emma, 35 years old, a married woman and a mother of two. My life seemed perfect. A successful career in marketing, a family with my husband Jack, and two wonderful children. But behind the facade of perfection, there was a storm brewing inside me, a whirlwind of exhaustion and depression pulling me down. Since the birth of our second child, my relationship with Jack had changed drastically. We were no longer close. Our intimacy faded, and our sexual relationship became non-existent. The physical touches became scarce, and we avoided discussing our personal needs. Many nights, I would lie in bed, my back turned to Jack, feeling a growing distance between us. I longed for the passion of our early days, but those memories felt like a distant dream. I tried everything to rekindle our connection, but every attempt seemed to make things worse. Jack withdrew further into his work, and every time I brought up the issue, he simply said he was tired and things would eventually improve. This left me feeling utterly alone. I didn't know how to share my feelings with anyone, and the emptiness inside me grew larger each day. One afternoon, after a long and stressful day at work, I boarded the train home. It was raining lightly, and my mood mirrored the dreary weather. I sat down, closed my eyes, and leaned back, hoping the long ride would give me some peace. Then I felt someone sit beside me. When I opened my eyes, I saw a young man, around 25, sitting next to me. He had an easy charm, striking features, and something about him immediately caught my attention. We started talking, and I learned his name was John. He worked in sports and lived not far from my area. Our conversation flowed effortlessly as we discussed work, life, and the pressures of daily responsibilities. John listened to me in a way I hadn't been listened to in a long time. He made me feel seen and understood in a way that Jack no longer did. After a while, the train reached my stop. I said goodbye to John, but there was a lingering feeling inside me, like something left unsaid. That night, I returned home, but my mind couldn't shake the image of him. A few days later, I saw John again on the same train. It felt like fate. This time, we sat even closer, and our conversation deepened. Before I knew it, I agreed to grab a drink with him after the ride. That evening, in the warm glow of a small cafe, I felt myself relax. John wasn't just young and handsome, but he exuded a charm that was impossible to resist. I knew it was wrong, but the loneliness I had been carrying, combined with the magnetic pull I felt toward him, made me weak. That night, after leaving the cafe, we went to a nearby hotel. We slept together. It was the first time I had ever cheated on Jack. The next morning, guilt hit me like a wave. I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered how I had allowed myself to end up in this situation. I loved my husband, I loved my family, but in that moment, all of it seemed overshadowed by the craving for attention, for care. John gave me something I hadn't felt in years, and I wasn't sure if I could walk away from that. But what confused me the most was that I wanted to see John again. The thrill, the excitement from our affair ignited a fire in me that had been dormant for so long. We continued meeting, always in secret, at places where I knew no one would find us. Every time I was with John, I felt alive, like I was no longer just Emma, the wife and mother burdened with responsibilities. I was just Emma, a woman with desires and needs I had buried deep within me. However, along with the pleasure came an overwhelming sense of guilt. Every time I returned home, it became harder to face Jack. He was still a good man, the father of my children, but the warmth between us had long since faded. I found myself lying more often, creating stories to explain my absences. It weighed heavily on me, but at the same time, I wasn't ready to let go of my time with John. I was torn between two worlds. I loved Jack, my husband, but I also craved John, my lover. I didn't know how to escape this tangled web. Perhaps what I truly needed wasn't just sexual satisfaction, but the emotional connection and attention I had been missing for so long. My life became a series of inner conflicts, and I knew I couldn't go on like this forever. I had to choose. Either confront the issues in my marriage and work through them, or continue my affair with John, knowing it would eventually destroy everything I had built. In the days that followed my last encounter with John, I made a conscious effort to distance myself from him. I had decided that ending our affair was the only way to protect my family. But even as I tried to move on, memories of John lingered in my mind. I missed his presence, his laughter, the way he made me feel understood. Each time my phone buzzed, I couldn't help but hope it was him. But John stopped texting me. At first, I thought he had finally accepted my decision to end things and moved on. Yet, as days passed, an unsettling feeling grew inside me. What if something had happened to him? My mind raced with worry, unable to shake the thought that he might be in trouble. One sleepless night, I lay next to Jack, my heart heavy with guilt and confusion. I couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. So I told Jack I had to leave for a business trip, another lie to cover up my true intentions. I booked a flight to the city where John lived, needing to know if he was okay. When I arrived at the hospital where I had tracked him down, the sight before me shattered my heart. John was sitting in a hospital bed, his head bald from chemotherapy, looking frail and weak. He had cancer, and he had been hiding it from me all along. He said he didn't want me to worry, didn't want me to feel burdened by his illness. I was devastated. Tears welled up in my eyes as I sat by his side, feeling a wave of guilt for not knowing what he was going through. I stayed with him, unable to leave. John needed me, and I couldn't abandon him in his weakest moment. We spent more time together, and with each passing day, I found myself falling deeper in love with him. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't walk away now. Then, one fateful day, as I sat by John's hospital bed, the door to his room opened. I looked up to see Jack standing there. His face was pale, expressionless, as he took in the scene before him. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the air in the room grow thick with tension. Jack didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at me and John, the weight of his silent gaze suffocating me. After a long, painful moment, Jack turned and walked away without a word. I wanted to run after him, to explain everything, but I was frozen in place, torn between the man I loved and the man I had betrayed. I couldn't bring myself to leave John, not in his condition. As John finished his treatment and began to recover, he begged me to stay with him. I looked into his tired, loving eyes, and for a brief moment, I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. I had a family waiting for me at home. No matter how much I loved John, I couldn't abandon my children and Jack. In the end, I made the difficult decision to return home, leaving John behind with a heavy heart. Back at home, Jack acted as if nothing had happened. He didn't ask me any questions, didn't confront me about where I had been. Our life continued on as if nothing had changed. He went to work, took care of the kids, and we ate dinner together as a family. But deep down, I knew Jack was hurting. His silence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. One day, Lily, the wife of Jack's best friend Stuart, invited me out for coffee. As we chatted, she casually mentioned something that stopped my heart. "Jack told Stuart everything," she said, her voice soft but serious. "He knows about you and John." I felt like the ground had fallen out from under me. Jack had known all along, yet he had said nothing. He had carried the weight of my betrayal in silence, letting me believe that I was keeping my secret safe. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Jack's quiet suffering tore at my heart in ways I couldn't even describe. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat next to Jack and confessed everything. I told him about the affair, about John's illness, about the lies. Tears streamed down my face as I begged for his forgiveness. Jack looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness but not anger. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I knew, Emma. I've known for a while. I was just waiting for you to tell me the truth. I understand what you've been going through, and I'm partly to blame for letting things get this far. I forgive you, but we need to rebuild from here." His words broke me. I realized then how lucky I was to have a man like Jack, patient, understanding, and willing to give our marriage another chance. We began working on our relationship, trying to find our way back to each other. As we held each other close, I realized that love isn't just about passion or desire. It's about standing together through the storm, even when the winds of doubt threatened to tear everything apart. And with Jack by my side, I knew that no matter how broken we had been, together we could always find a way to heal.